Coming up on this week's episode of Hip Hop Now podcast, Redman warned Keith Murray about cannabis. Lil Wayne was scared when he first worked with Eminem. And my thoughts on the new project by Nas and Hit Boy, Magic 2. Do you believe in magic? Let's talk about it. Welcome to Hip Hop Now podcast. If you're from the future, you know what to do. Get your ass out of here. Don't disrespect the legend. Hip hop is here to stay. Let's get right into the business. I am your host, Vegas, and this is Hip Hop Now podcast, a podcast designed specifically to keep you caught up on all things music, hip hop, and culture, or maybe hip hop music and culture throughout the week. Shout out to the supporters over at patreon.com/hiphopnow. And if you would like to join them in becoming a supporter of this very podcast, I appreciate you. You can do that with the link in the description of this episode. Also, I have merch. It's summertime. It's hot. I have tank tops. I have t-shirts. I have stickers. I have all you need to represent Hip Hop Now podcast if you enjoy it. That link is also in the description of this episode. And if you're like me, you get the hoodie early because, hoodie season come around, you just throw it on like, oh, this old thing, I bought this during the summer. I do that sometimes. Maybe that's some kind of old head thing or whatever. But big shout out to hiphopdx.com, XXLmagazine.com, complex.com, and a couple of places where I get my stories from. Let's get right into the business. Redman says he warned Keith Murray about difficult cannabis before album fiasco. Now, I picked this story because I have no idea what they are talking about. The original source is MREC TV. Shout out to him, who did an interview with Keith Murray. And this story is on hiphopdx.com, so you can check it out, link, watch it, and all that good stuff. But here is what was said, and I quote, and I think this is Eric Sermon talking. Let's see. Cannabis just made it so difficult at the end of the day, he said to the outlet on Wednesday, June 19th. You know, you're from the future. You already saw that joint. Get the hell out of here. But actually, I'm from the future because today's a later date than whatever. And he was referring to In God's We Trust, Crush Microphones to Dust album, which was released in 2011. This is Keith Murray talking. I was just like, we had the opportunity to make it, and I was working on an album. So when you see those tracks that say produced by Eric Sermon, they were originally going to be me, but I gave them up. But then the album suffered. It was my brainchild, my baby. But then Cannabis, not talking bad about him, but he didn't follow through with promoting the album properly. And then he was getting into it with the publicist. It was a classic album, but we didn't do no shows for this, no promotion. I was like, oh my God. And then Redman, the end, because it's a family podcast, we don't say it, was like, be careful. I didn't know what he was talking about. Then damn. It's a testament to the often flawless chemistry between Cannabis and Murray that midway through the Planet Asia said, okay, so this is something else. I'm not going to get into all of it, but apparently it seems like working with Cannabis on a project can be difficult. And probably from what it wasn't difficult to get the bars together, but difficult to promote. For the uninitiated, for one, I never heard this album. Now I'm kind of intrigued. In 2011, I had heard recent works and didn't really like what I heard at all. Um, and I was once a huge fan of both. So I couldn't imagine a project that sounded good. That finally came out, I thought that was cool. You know, they had Killer Priest, I think Razkaz also. That was the Four Horsemen, but Keith Murray I never heard. But for the uninitiated, releasing music independently, part of a label or whatever, there are duties beyond your bars, your verses that you have to adhere to, also to sort of guarantee success, right? Not guarantee success. Just give your best shot at something being successful. And when successful, it's not just, well, the music's great, the lyrics are great, the song is great, right? You can have a classic on your hands, but if you don't promote, if you don't do the things that are needed to push this album out to the public with appearances and interviews and just going along with the strategic plan to make this everything it should be, then it's all for nothing. From what I'm hearing, Keith Murray was more than willing to do that, but Cannabis had issues. And again, it's no disrespect to Cannabis, but we just know people who, you know, maybe Cannabis just wasn't happy, right? Maybe he wasn't happy with the rollout. Maybe he didn't like the album cover. Maybe he didn't like the overall concept after the fact. Maybe he didn't like the way the publicist was positioning the album to the public. If you don't like that, you're not going to go into an interview where they're going to ask you questions about something you don't agree with. But business is business. And anytime you are playing on that level of business, you just got to keep your part to it. If not, get away from the record industry on all sides, independent, major, whatever, and just go and release stuff somewhere else on Bandcamp where you don't have to do interviews and you don't have to do, oh, but guess what? Cats won't do that when they've already tasted what it's like to have a push and attention in hip hop. So it's kind of like a sacrifice thing. You may not like the industry. You may not like your position in the industry today or 2011. But if you're going to play the game, play the game. That's all I'm saying. If you're going to play the game, play the game. All right? Lil Wayne said he was scared when he first worked with Eminem. Now, I really, truly feel like this is not the first time I've heard Lil Wayne say this. And I think he's like on a flowers tour of just giving flowers to his counterparts and the people who influenced him. There's nothing wrong with that. Sometimes, you know, cats get older and they get real, everybody get older and they start to feel real reflective on their career and their life, and they're more willing to be vulnerable about their thoughts at different times. So I can dig it. But let's see what he said. Lil Wayne was talking to the New York Times for this one as a part of a feature for 50 years of hip hop, which is coming up. And Eminem said this as it relates to Eminem. I was scared actually when I called him for a song. That is a monster. Can't get them out of our head. Every meaning, every aspect of them, things that rhyme, we hear it. I already know the gift and the curse that he had. And I love to hear the way he puts it together. Now, fans of Lil Wayne, I know what you're thinking. I know every time somebody says Eminem, there's a party. They don't play him in the shop. They don't play him 1,000% more successful than everybody play on the block. The bar for what's dope or who's dope, right? It's just never going to be. And not every block is the same. Let's just get that out the way. Not everybody block is the same. Not everybody barbershop is the same. You walk in a barbershop, you might hear a Britney Spears album playing because that barber likes it. You ain't going to hear it in the shop. I've heard some things in the shop. Not everybody like boom bap elite when it comes to playing music in a barbershop. There's some barbershops where you're like, man, please put something on. Illmatic something. But nevertheless, I think it's dope to see. I know it's flowers at the same time, but I think it's dope to see because Lil Wayne, MC, there are numerous rappers in the hip hop game who have given Lil Wayne props for not charging them for features, and more importantly, for writing his verse and getting it back to them quickly. Lil Wayne is a prime example of a true hip hop head who has a success level where he doesn't even have to acknowledge anybody above or below a certain level, right? And with Eminem, I think a lot of it just goes into their different MCs of different ilk who recognize not what he's saying, but how he put the words together. Sorry to break it to you, but that is a part of hip hop. That is what MCs do. The simplest rappers, of course, you can look at their work and say, well, it's not that difficult. He said, I'm going to pull up at the store. What's so deep about that? We're not talking about them. They are not necessarily artists. They're entertainers, right? But hip hop artists value wordplay regardless of what's being said. So if Eminem decides I'm just going to write a whole bar about being a cannibal and I'm going to make it a metaphor or simile at the end to say I'm the cannibal of hip hop. So what? I think a lot of your favorite rappers who acknowledge him are acknowledging the wordplay. And I don't necessarily agree with Eminem feeling scared. I would feel personally that Eminem's a monster with the wordplay. I have to either meet, or that's how I think about it. Because if I'm scared, then I shouldn't even be on the track. And I know Lil Wayne just says that, and it's kind of a way of, it's kind of like a flower, right? But I don't think any MC should be afraid to spit next to another. I think it should be a challenge, right? You should challenge yourself to say, this dude is crazy. I do not want him to show me up on this record. So I'm going to go as far as I think he's going to go. Not in subject matter, but in skill level. I think it's also a slippery slope because if you're already dope, bars, you shouldn't have to do that. Just be you. Because the prime example is the Renegade song. Now, revisionists would like to say that Eminem did not murder him on his own ish, but I beg to differ. He did, right? Why? Because the Jay-Z that's featured on Renegade didn't rap like that on any other song on Blueprint. I don't care what the beats sound like. Jay-Z was rapping up to his competition, which was Eminem. So he wanted to be savvy with his wordplay. But he could have just been the Jay-Z he was when he used to rap like the Foosnickens. He could have been that Jay-Z and still pulled it off because that was naturally him. Trying to do something to fit in where Eminem sound loose on it. And it's his beat. He sound loose on it. That's what made it stand out. That Jay-Z sound not uncomfortable because he was into what he was rapping, But it just sounded like he was doing a thing because Eminem was there. So to me, it was the wrong approach. I think it's dope to see two MCs, or one in this case, talk about another in that way, by giving them props. But I also feel like, it's a hot, it's a hot topic. When anytime Eminem is being given respect, especially through another MC, there's this thing where people kind of want to challenge it, right? Find something wrong with it. And I think it's stupid because, again, the content is one thing, but the technique is another. And that's where your favorite rapper is coming from. He's talking about the technique. Yo, am I getting dressed to this dude murdering his baby moms? No, right? Because when I get dressed, I like to hear a certain record. But guess what else? I'm not listening to the Lots when I do that either. I'm listening to Rick Ross because I'm getting ready to go out and I need to hear about champagne and pouring out Ciroc or whatever, right? When I'm feeling like grimy mode and I'm driving, I just wanted some beats to thump on some boom bap, I'm going to get Griselda or I'm going to get the Locks, right? When I want to hear Eminem, honestly, me, I want to hear the wordplay. I'm not there to be like, yo, man, I want to hear some murder bars about, your family. No, at no point, right? I mean, about how we all hear and listen or whatever. But yet again, here's another one of your favorite rappers and giving Eminem props. Does that make him the GOAT of all GOATs? No, I don't even think Lil Wayne is the GOAT. But nevertheless, it's good to see, especially in 50 years of hip hop. We understand. This ain't going to be a long show, though. So, lastly, if you don't know, you've been under a rock, or you're a grown adult, doesn't have time to kind of go on Twitter and peruse this hip hop website looking for information on Instagram, but you listen to Hip Hop Now podcast. I appreciate you. And you say to yourself, Nas and Hit Boy have a new project, which is the fifth in their works together since 2020. It's the fifth project. And everybody says all the others were dope. And now they have a project called Magic 2, which is a sequel to Magic, obviously. And you say to yourself, I want to check it out, but I'm skeptical. So let me listen to Hip Hop Now podcasts. Here are my impressions. To save you some time, if we're looking at the 5 projects that Nas and Hit Boy put together and we're ranking them, it's last. Does that make it whack? No, that just makes it not as good as the other ones. And the other ones were great, right? I think it's a good project. I think we didn't have to have it, but I'm glad we do. I think they went to the well too many times, but in some ways, so what? And I say that because it's not whack, but I just feel like it's not as good as one may anticipate coming off of the projects that have been released between the two, right? So let's get into the details. So it's 11 songs with one bonus, right? 10 songs, one bonus makes 11. 32 minutes, so not a lot of your time is required to listen to this. The vibe of the app, let me get real quick. 2 features only, one being 50 Cent and the other being 21 Savage. If you know me, I am not a 21 Savage fan. I just think he's just not good of a rapper. I am a 50 Cent fan. And if we are being honest, the song that 50 Cent is featured on is called Office Hours. we could have done without 50 on it. It was a lackluster performance from 50. It's not whack. That's the thing with some of these guys. It's like they could never really be bad to the point where you feel like it's just a garbage verse. But to me, it was such a forgettable verse from his energy on the verse, from the bars to the length of the record. I mean, the length of the verse. It felt like it was over too quick. And, you know, at the end, he like that's kind of how he ends his bars. And I just felt like if that wasn't there, I don't think I would miss it. I've heard better performances from 50 with one verse on the Power intro, on the BMF intro. Way better version of 50. So I don't even think this was necessary, to be honest. Standout tracks on this album, though, for me are I like Abracadabra. I like Bokeem Woodbine, Irvin Magic Johnson. I really like What This All Really Means, and also a record called Slow Down. Now, I like a lot about this album. Let's start with the production. I think and please don't take this to the bank, but what's disappointing as a fan is some of the beats. I think previously, Hit Boy would surprise me with his production. King's Disease 3 raised the bar so high with his level of production and beat flips and stuff that I was anticipating the production just being crazy from beginning to end. And I think it's good, but it's just not as good, which is okay. But I was a little disappointed because I was like, oh, I feel like with this album, it gets stronger later in the project or halfway through, which isn't a bad thing. But the way you start sets my impression and how long it takes you to get to the thing that makes me go, it's a big deal. Now, these are my impressions. I'm going to continue to listen and start to feel a little bit differently. On the side of the lyrics, I feel like there are times where Nas sounds way too basic for this to be Nas. I feel like there are certain lines. Again, I'm not asking you to go jump through hoops to describe a glass of water on your dresser in a real hip hop way. No. But Nas set a certain level of expectation for us as a fan, even now, that he has met time and time again. I just feel like this go round, there's a lot of weak bars. There's a lot of weak bars over decent flows and decent beats. And that's what kind of makes it feel lackluster, like, yo, what are we talking about? Right? But it's not whack. This is the thing I'm going to say to those of you who may feel like any criticism that's not positive is 100% negative. That's not true. All my criticism is constructive. And what I'll say is the reason why I feel the way I feel, as far as my impressions go, it's not a review, is because Hit Boy and Nas set the bar, right? Nas set the bar because he's Nas. He is hip hop royalty. He is in the GOAT conversation. So there's a certain level of expectation, no matter how old he gets, as long as he's releasing music. People are going to feel like Illmatic is happening again every trip, which is unrealistic, but that's a whole nother story. But him and Hit Boy together have set the bar high as well. Because at this stage in Nas's career, to previously have 4 projects that are dope and they kind of got better as they went on, That's a high bar. So when you're coming out with Magic, which I think dropped in 2021 or 2022, like it was like Christmas time, and it was a surprise. It was like, yo, it's dropping tomorrow. And a lot of it felt like old Nas. For this to be the sequel, it doesn't have to be tied to a specific approach, because it's a very different approach than the first Magic. But again, you set the bar. You're calling it Magic 2. Everybody instantly goes back to the first time they heard Magic and what that felt like. That's what music is about, right? It's about emotions, right? That's what the Hit Boy said, right? It's about emotions, right? Well, you're signaling by calling it Magic 2. Oh, it's the sequel to this. And what do people do? They remember this and they go back and listen to this and they think this is going to be the same as 2, and 2 could be different, right? It could be a different approach. What this is, I would just say this. There's a lot more in the lane of trap than anything. I feel like Nas is better rapping over those beats, but I felt like I liked the approach previously where it didn't happen as often. And I think even in some cases, if you take King's Disease 1, where I think there's maybe 3 songs that got that feel to it, them songs are dope. You know what I'm saying? And I just feel like lyrically, when you have some of these trap beats, it's just not meeting that bar that they set when Hit Boy is producing a trap beat and Nas is rapping over it. It just did. But man, oh man, when it's boom bap, he said, me and Hit Boy like the new Gangstar, they are in the pocket. It's a Hit Boy beat that's a boom bap beat and Nas rhyming over it. That's magic. So do I want a boom bap album from them? No, not necessarily. I accept whatever they decide to do because they've earned it. But I could tell you without a doubt, no matter how many times I listen, it's not going to make my top 5 of the year because my top 5 of the year so far are so solid in what they do that it's difficult for me to even find a negative, so to speak. So there you have it. What do you think about Nas and Hit Boy's brand new project, Magic 2? Have you heard it? Do you like it? Do you love it? Is it trash? Whatever it may be, comment section below. Please know that this podcast is available where you get any podcast. All you got to do is search for Hip Hop Down Podcast in your favorite podcasting app. Click subscribe and stay locked into weekly hip hop content. And if you are listening on podcast and you're like, I would love to see a video version. Well, guess what? There is one. Go to YouTube and find Hip Hop Now Podcast. Until next time, y'all, I'm not a critic. I'm a fan. Peace.